It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. Police have arrested the father of the 15-year-old girl who killed a fellow student, teacher, and injured 6 other people at Madison's Abundant Life Christian School late last year. Jeffrey Rupp now faces criminal charges, 2 felony counts of intent to sell or loan a dangerous weapon to someone under 18, and 1 felony count of contributing to the delinquency of a child. His first court appearance is scheduled for today. To get us up to speed on this case and what happens going forward, we're joined by John Gross, a clinical associate professor of law at the UW Law School and director of its Public Defender Project. John, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Thanks for having me.
What was your reaction yesterday to the arrest of Jeffrey Rupp now?
I can't say I was that surprised. I think when the incident, the tragic shooting at the school happened, there were questions about what role a parent might have played. And I think in looking at the potential charges that could have been filed, it's not particularly surprising to me that these 2 charges were eventually brought for the allowing the child, basically giving the child a weapon that they were not legally entitled to have, and then the contributing to the delinquency of a minor, which is the more serious charge because there was a death involved.
Yes, can you explain that charge, contributing to the delinquency of a minor? What is the scope of that?
So essentially, the charge asks the question, did the minor commit some type of an act that would be considered criminal, what we would call a juvenile delinquency proceeding? If a minor does something like that, if a minor commits what would be considered a crime if they were an adult, this charge essentially asks, did another adult do something, contribute in some way to the child committing this other offense? And then the seriousness of that offense is graded based on the harm that the child inflicted. And if there was a relationship between the adult and the child where they had an obligation to keep the child safe, to make sure that they didn't inflict harm on someone, then this is the charge, contributing to the delinquency of a minor.
So step back for us. Since late December, when this mass shooting happened, what have investigators and prosecutors learned about this father that led to his arrest early yesterday?
I think we will learn a little bit more about the investigation this afternoon when the father has his, Mr. Rupp now, when he has his initial appearance in court and they file the formal criminal complaint against him. I suspect that that complaint will detail the type of investigation and the investigative steps that police have taken over the last several months and lay out the prosecution's case against him. But it sounds like from what we know to this point that first it seems like he had purchased a firearm and given it to his daughter, which again, if you're under the age of 18, you cannot possess a dangerous weapon in Wisconsin. And so giving her access to giving her this type of a firearm is a criminal offense. And then we've heard that there was some fascination that she had with school shootings, mass shootings, and that some of that fascination may have been observable in terms of what she had in her room, the type of things she had on her walls. But it will be a bit of a challenge, I think, for the prosecution to perhaps connect the dots that the father knew about this fascination, because at least some of it was taking place online and may have just been something that her father didn't have access to or wasn't aware of.
In terms of access to the firearms, what effect could potential access to the gun safe code to unlock the safe have on this case?
I mean, I have to describe that as pretty irresponsible gun ownership. I mean, the point of having the gun safe, right, would be to prevent a minor, someone under the age of 18, from gaining access to firearms that the father was legally entitled to purchase and have in his home. So sharing that code with the daughter effectively negates the idea of having the gun safe at all. And, Wisconsin, we do have a statute that criminalizes leaving a firearm within the easy reach of a child. However, that statute doesn't apply because in the definition of that statute, you have to actually be under the age of 14. But essentially, it's the same type of act. He's just indiscriminately allowing a child to have access to firearms that they have no legal right to possess.
We're talking about the recent arrest of Jeffrey Rupnow, the father of the 15-year-old girl who shot and killed two people at Abundant Life Christian School in Madison late last year. We have UW-Madison law professor John Gross with us. John, there's been another case like this where parents have been charged for providing a weapon to a child. Can you remind us of the case in Michigan and what the outcome there was?
Sure, that was a case where again, both parents, they were living together with their child, Ethan Crumbly, was the name of the boy, and the Crumbleys were both charged with a form of um, involuntary manslaughter. That is not a charge that we have in Wisconsin. We have reckless and negligent homicides. Involuntary manslaughter is a little bit of a different charge, but essentially the allegation was that they ignored a potential danger to others, and that danger resulted in the death of others. And again, in that case, their son was alleged to be suffering from some pretty serious mental health issues, and they allowed him to have access to a firearm. They stored firearms in their home, but they were not kept in a gun safe. They did not have a trigger guard, and in fact, they had also gone out and bought a gun as a gift for their child, which he was allowed to use at a firing range under the supervision of his parent under Michigan law. But again, the gun was not stored in a safe way in the home, so he had access to it and used it in a school shooting.
So, John, now we've seen some isolated cases of parents being prosecuted. Do you see Michigan or elsewhere these cases setting a precedent? Do you expect to see parents prosecuted for this more frequently?
That does seem to be the trend when it involves school shootings. We've seen the case in Michigan. There's also a pending case in Florida, and now we have this case in Wisconsin. It is traditionally the criminal law has been limited. It limits its punishments to people who directly cause harm, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it has been reluctant to say that other people who may have contributed in some way to a harm that occurs, holding them criminally responsible. And so this is a bit of an expansion of the criminal law. It seems to be limited at this point just to school shootings or incidents of mass violence. And so that might continue to be a limitation on it, but it is a sort of new approach to saying that other people who didn't pull the trigger, didn't use the firearm, that they too should face some type of criminal sanction for the acts of a minor.
Do you anticipate appeals courts or higher courts falling into line here, agreeing with punishing parents for their child's behavior up to the level of homicide?
So I think it's harder to argue that various homicide charges, like the one that was brought in Michigan, this involuntary manslaughter charge, I'm not sure if appellate courts will actually uphold those convictions.
Mm.
Those are homicide statutes where, again, traditionally, the person who is punished is the person who directly commits the homicide and not somebody who may have contributed in some way to the person being motivated to or being able to commit the homicide. The charges we have in Wisconsin are a little bit different because he hasn't been charged with a homicide. He's been charged with a firearms offense that he gave a gun to a child, someone under the age of 18, which is illegal to do. So that is I would characterize that as a firearms offense. And then he's been charged with an offense that really addresses the care that you are required to provide to minors, contributing to delinquency of a minor, which is a charge which has been on the books in Wisconsin and other states for many, many decades. And that has been upheld, that adults cannot do acts that encourage juveniles to commit crimes or enable juveniles to commit crimes. And so while some states are taking a more aggressive, I would say, approach to this in charging homicides, I think the charges here in Wisconsin will withstand scrutiny by an appellate judge.
One complication you have referenced before is hindsight bias. And would you mind explaining what that is and how it reflects in this case?
Sure. Hindsight bias is a psychological bias that people have that when something bad happens, they tend to look back in hindsight and feel like they should have seen it coming, or they did see it coming, but didn't pay enough attention to the signs that were there. The classic example is that someone breaks up with someone, and the person who was broken up with looks back and says, "Oh, I should have seen it coming." Um, in a case like this with a school shooting, the tendency of a jury is going to be to think, well, the parents must have seen it coming, right? Hindsight bias says there must have been signs of this because we're not comfortable with the idea that something this bad, this horrific, could just happen out of the blue without any advanced warning. And so I think that bias makes it a little bit easier for prosecutors to put these cases in front of a jury and get a conviction.
Walk us through what is next in the legal process for the charges against Rupp now?
So the next process is going to happen later today. He's going to have an initial appearance in front of a judge where the formal charges will be filed, which will contain factual allegations to support the charges, and that document will likely be publicly available for people to view. He will enter a plea of not guilty, and there will be a determination about his bail conditions, whether monetary bail should be set or other restrictions placed on his liberty. And after this, because these are felony charges, he would have a right to a preliminary hearing and the discovery process would play out.
Mm.
I suspect there will be some litigation about statements he's made to
Mm.
police officers because I think those will be a significant part of the allegations,
Mm.
statements that he made to the police and some publicly in the aftermath of the shooting.
John, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
John Gross, Clinical Associate Professor of Law at the UW Law School, with us to talk about yesterday's arrest of Jeffrey Rupnow, the father of the 15-year-old girl responsible for a mass shooting at a Madison school in December. The Wisconsin Department of Justice has the Speak Up, Speak Out program, encouraging students and adults to report when they observe children in crisis. They offer a free 24-hour tip line, 1-800-MY-SUSO1. Coming up on Wisconsin Today, a Viroqua coffee company must source its beans from other parts of the world. The founder of Wonder State Coffee.
We are committed to being the best employer we can, but when we have all this uncertainty and these additional costs, it makes it very hard for us to stay true to our mission.
Tariffs and that cup of joe. That's next from WPR News. It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. Coffee plants need to grow in a tropical climate, something that is nearly impossible to do here in the U.S. That makes President Trump's tariffs challenging to a coffee company in Viroqua, which must source its beans from other parts of the globe. 10% tariffs cover most coffee-producing countries, and that could soon drive up the cost for a morning cup of joe. Then, on top of the uncertain business climate, a poor growing season this winter and rising global demand pushed commodity prices for coffee to record highs in recent months. For a firsthand look at the volatility, we called up TJ Samanchian, co-owner of Wonder State Coffee based in Viroqua. They have 4 locations around Wisconsin. TJ, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Thank you, Kate. Great to be here.
Let's jump right into tariffs. How big of a deal would they be for your business?
They are a very big deal. I've been with coffee for 25 years, and we have never, ever considered dealing with tariffs. And so this is new terrain for us. And, we currently are looking at a blanket 10% tariff tax on everything that we import from coffee farmers. And we are uncertain on what's happening with the reciprocal tariffs. So there are countries we buy from that are on that list as well, and we don't know what's happening there.
Take us around the world. Where are you sourcing your beans? Where are your farmers?
So we buy directly from small farmer cooperatives and other organizations from around the world in Central America, South America, Africa. Uh, our main countries that we buy from are Peru and Colombia and South America, Guatemala, Mexico, in Central America. We buy a lot of coffee from Ethiopia, but also from Kenya and Burundi and Rwanda as well.
How much of an eye do your suppliers have on this? Are they concerned as well?
Yeah, they're very concerned because as we, right now it is just at 10%, which just kind of makes, in a weird way, everyone on the same playing field.
Mm-hmm.
But early on, when the Mexican and Canadian tariffs were being proposed, when you start seeing different tariff amounts for different countries, that's when people who are buying coffee might shift their purchases. So if right now, if those reciprocal tariffs take effect, we buy coffee from Nicaragua, and that tariff could go as high as 28%. So in a scenario like that, we would maybe be forced to reduce some of our purchases from a place like Nicaragua and make that up in a neighboring country. We wouldn't necessarily do that. We're a company that is built on relationships, and we are very committed to the farmers that we buy from. But on the aggregate, this is where coffee farmers are really uncertain and nervous on how these tariffs play out.
It's fascinating because there's a geopolitical influence to the coffee industry that that I, as a consumer, just don't think about. And I'm wondering, can you walk us through the math of how tariffs could affect the price that the customer pays in the things that you are buying from other countries and then the other inputs into the business?
Yeah, for sure. And something to be clear about is we cannot replace coffee with domestic production,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a tiny little bit of coffee that's grown in Hawaii and Puerto Rico, but that makes up less than 1% of U.S. consumption. So just to be clear that coffee is one of those products that the tariffs couldn't push production, domestic production.
Right.
But right now, the world commodity price for coffee is at a historic high. So coffee is traded in a commercial sense on a commodity exchange, and that had been at a kind of hovering at about $1.50 to $1.75 for the past many years. That's the price per pound of the raw coffee,
Mm-hmm.
what we call green coffee. And today that price is hovering around $4. And that's the highest it's ever been historically. Um, and so when you put a 10% or even higher tariff on top of that, that's a multiplier effect. So we already, so that $4 is above the minimum price that we've been guaranteeing farmers for years. Our minimum price this year was $3.15. So our cost of coffee, we've gone up for the first time ever, really. Our costs have gone up because of the commodity market. And so we already have had a price adjustment. And we have passed some of those costs onto our customers. Where the tariffs come in is, this is just a tax. And to be clear, like, we are the ones paying that. We are the ones who are paying the government, those who are importing the coffee or importing anything. We're the ones who are actually paying that tax. So I have to come up with, our company needs to finance that purchase. And today we talk in container loads of coffee. And for us, a container of coffee might cost around $200,000. So that tariff tax, if it stays at 10%, will be $20,000. So that's an additional $20,000 that we need to come up with. And I'm literally borrowing that money from our bank to pay that tax. So we get hit with that up front. And then, as we absorb those costs, eventually we are going to have to look at increasing prices again.
How accommodating is the bank in this story? Because I'm not sure whether the coffee business is recession resistant or does okay in market downturns. What might the bank say?
Yeah, we actually have a really great relationship. We're here in Southwest Wisconsin, rural Viroqua,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a relationship with the local bank. So we're very fortunate that our bank is sticking right at our side. We are one of one of the lucky ones. I was just in DC meeting with senators and small business owners, and I met with some folks who are small business owners who are all their product is coming from China. And there was one case where a woman from Minnesota, an entrepreneur, she has an order in China that's she's already paid for. So $150,000 order. And she has got to leave that product in China at the factory because she cannot afford the in her bank. She's tapped out with loans.
Can't afford the
The cost
duties.
of
Yeah.
the duties would be the tariff would be almost $250,000,
Mm.
and she just doesn't have that money. And so there is a lot of small businesses who are at risk of completely going out of business because they just cannot finance. They can't come up. This isn't even a question about them raising prices. They can't afford to get their product in the country,
Mm.
period. So they're going to run out of inventory and they're just going to go out of business. We are fortunate. I think coffee has also proven to be a recession-proof product. People are
Mm.
still gonna have their small luxuries,
Mm.
their daily routine of treating themselves to coffee, whether it's at home or in one of our cafes.
Okay, so those are the beans, but that's not all you need to run a business like this. You've got your to-go cups, you've got your flavoring syrups, you've got your stir sticks, you've got that espresso machine that can't break down. Like, what about these other things? Because we keep hearing the tariffs are also going to affect so many other aspects of the things we use. How will that hit your business as you run your business?
Yeah, and this is kind of the story we share with all small businesses right now is we don't really know. We know it's going to impact it, and we're trying to understand how this is all playing out. And do we need to purchase up with if one of our suppliers has inventory right now? But again, that means we need to come up with more money to buy that inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, we are expecting things like the bags that we put our coffee in, the retail bags, and in our cafes, all of our to-go containers and to-go cups. We have some inventory, and this is everyone who is lucky enough to have some inventory. We're kind of just looking out at the horizon with uncertainty and thankful that we have product in our warehouses now.
Yeah.
For those who are just having to put orders in, and that's true for some of our products. Yeah, it's we are expecting things to be more expensive. We don't know if if it's coming from China with the 145% tariff. That's astronomically more expensive. We buy from U.S. companies, and they're sourcing from other parts of the world often. So then the big picture for that is just, for us to be really conservative and cautious about how we're investing in our business.
Mm.
Are we going to, buy new equipment? How we can be staffing up and investing in our staff. These are all things that are feeling very uncertain and, don't really give us a lot of ability to grow and invest right now.
TJ Samanchin is with us, co-owner of Wonder State Coffee, has 4 locations around the state as we look more deeply into the tariff situation and the coffee economy. TJ, you mentioned staff. How are baristas and other staff members affected by this uncertainty in the coffee market?
For us, it really is just we are committed to being the best employer we can. But when we have all this uncertainty and these additional costs, it makes it very hard for us to stay true to our mission. So I think just like we aren't certain about what's ahead, that definitely impacts, we're all in that same boat. We certainly aren't talking about layoffs and shrinking staff. We're not at risk of that. But in terms of adding staff, or we have a profit share program, we certainly are shrinking our what we're projecting for profit this year. That impacts all of us. So, and and costs for business have already gone up. We provide healthcare to some degree for all of our staff, and those costs are going up. So our ability to be the best employer we want is definitely hindered because of the tariffs and just this general business climate.
So the business climate, tariffs, or climate change, I mean, what is scarier for the future of a business like this? Because there are climate impacts as well.
Yeah, so we didn't talk about why coffee prices are higher. And coffee historically has been very volatile. It'll have quick peaks and then drops back down, and which is very disruptive for the folks in the middle, like ourselves, small roasters like ourselves, and for the farmers. But we now are at this historic high in the coffee market. And that is largely because it's just harder to grow coffee now. And that is impacting the global supply. One of the biggest reasons it's harder is because of climate change and climate shocks. So you have drought, and you have rains coming in the time of year when it typically doesn't. And we have some of the largest producers in the world, Brazil and Vietnam, have had multi-year shortages in their coffee production. So that has been predicted. Folks have been saying that it's going to get harder to grow coffee and it will shrink the supply. At the same time, demand is increasing. There's more coffee drinkers around the globe. And so that we think that coffee will, that these new prices are the new norm to a degree. And that just means, like, for all of us, for our company and for folks who drink coffee, we should be expecting that we have to pay more and make sure that the farmers are getting what they need to keep investing in their farms and keep the production going.
I want to land on relationships. You have deep relationships with farmers. You have the customer relationships on the front line in the coffee shops. And in these challenging times, what do relationships mean to you?
Yeah, they are really critical. I think we have proven to the farmers that we buy from that through the thin years when that commodity price is very, very low, we still keep paying our high price to the farmers. And some of the farmers we buy from, they are from when we started the company 20 years ago. So some of these relationships go decades,
Way back.
where they're
Yeah.
way back, or they're where the children of the farmers that we were buying from when we started are the ones that we're now buying from. So those relationships run deep, and they really do mean everything to us. This is what buying direct means. And this is what is one of the more frustrating components of all the tariff impact is supply chains, and resilient supply chains are built on relationships. And that's true if you're buying from a local farmer down the street or a local business, or if you're buying from someone across the globe. That there's someone on the other end of that trading relationship.
Yeah.
That's true if you're buying from someone in China or a coffee farmer in Colombia. And so that is really at the core of who we are in these times of crisis, is when it becomes most important and most apparent. Like during COVID, So I feel like we're back in that place where we're just really needing to let the farmers know that we're committed to them, and vice versa. They see that the tariffs are really impacting us, and the farmers are reaching out and asking how we're doing.
Hmm.
How are we dealing with these impacts? So these relationships really mean everything to us. We are, again, we travel throughout the year. We just had a bunch of staff in Guatemala meeting with the farmer group that we buy from there. Yeah, so I think, and that when I hear the kind of the political rhetoric around the tariffs, that part is really frustrating for a company like us who we depend on international trade. Coffee is an international product, and those relationships are really threatened when we just kind of take a too narrow of a view of the economy and keep pushing just for domestic production without thinking about how supply chains are built and how long they take to establish.
TJ, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for being here.
I really appreciate it. Thanks, Kate.
TJ Semanchen is co-owner of Wonder State Coffee that is based in Viroqua with 4 locations around Wisconsin. We talked about the economic uncertainty and the volatility in the coffee business and how it affects a Wisconsin roaster. Coming up, a Sheboygan game store owner says games are more than just fun. They can boost our social and mental well-being.
How can that game help you improve as a human and be more connected?
That's next here on WPR News. You're listening to Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. Now it's time for Wisconsin Life. Here's producer Maureen McCullum with a poem in honor of Mother's Day, which is Sunday.
As we get older, our relationships with our parents evolve. Poet Carl Michael Iglesias knows this and has been reflecting on how he's grown into a new version of his mother's son. Iglesias explores this evolution along with his own gratitude in the poem Satellite.
Satellite. The day you leave back to your plants in Indiana, I pick up where we left off. Throwing away clothes I didn't wear and birthday cards that didn't age well. Letting go of all my once goods. After the door closes, I remember I forgot my keys. I forgot what I always drum my pockets for every time I'm between the threshold. Sitting on the glass table near the couch. I appreciate how when you're here, there is someone inside waiting. Or not, but with the potential to open up. Grateful for how my name echoes from down the hall. When you first arrived, I forgot to kiss you goodnight, and you invited me to be grateful. Now I want to kiss everyone good morning. Everyone, my brother, my sister. Thank you, nourishment. Standing outside apartment 1 with my hand over my heart, grateful to have someone inside to call out for, to drum a window at 3 a.m. when I've lost my keys. Thank you, listener. Grateful for the church in your phone. Thank you, Sunday. A woman is in love, hunched over a small screen, grateful to be present, her service streaming live. Gracias, Señor. Gracias, Señor. Gracias, Señor. Sobbing, and must be grateful for what I'm grateful for, because I'm crying in the other room at my own juncture with God. Our doors open. both of us, who smack our lips when we cry, annoyed with how long it has taken us to be grateful.
That was Carl Michael Iglesias reading his poem, Satellite. It's part of his poetry chapbook called The Bounce. After he recorded his poem, I asked Iglesias to explain the inspiration behind Satellite.
This poem, Satellite, centers around my mother visiting my apartment, and me, moments later, locked out after she left. For Mother's Day, I find myself reflecting not just on our relationship, but on the strange and beautiful phenomena of becoming someone new, continuing to get to know each other while remaining the child that they remember us to be. Some moments take years to appreciate. They stay tucked away inside you, waiting. You might forget the key, but all it takes is a knock. We often pair our youth with angst and overlook the truth that our first best friends are the ones who raised us. It wasn't until my 30s, after moving across the country, that I understood how blessed I am to be loved by someone who knows me from the inside out. Part of my responsibility as a poet is to document my histories, personal, familial, and collective, honoring my mother. Her timeless, joyful efforts to move through the world with faith have found its way into my work, about how precious our time is with each other and in this world, about how her light lives in me. I continue learning from her, grace for one, and maybe how Mother's Day is a moment for gratitude, for those who shaped us, walk beside us, and continue teaching us how to become, those who open the door.
Carl Michael Iglesias is a poet and writer who grew up in Milwaukee and now lives in Brooklyn. His newest collection of poetry is called The Bounce. Wisconsin Life is a co-production of Wisconsin Public Radio and PBS Wisconsin. Additional support comes from Lowell and Mary Peterson of Appleton. I'm Maureen McCullum.
This is Wisconsin Today. Board games are seeing a rise in popularity, with titles like Settlers of Catan and Wingspan becoming household names. A game shop owner in Sheboygan has been introducing her community to these board games for nearly 20 years, and not just because they're fun. She makes the case that games also provide social connection and boost our mental well-being. She's reached out to the local community with a focus on making connections and supporting neurodivergent students and seniors with dementia. Lynn Podian is owner of the Game Board in Sheboygan, and she talked with Rob Ferret earlier this week.
Now, you've got a unique story of how you ended up with a game store. I usually think, okay, somebody's been playing games or super into games forever. They open a store. You kind of got into games in a different way. Can you share that story?
Yeah. My son had a severe speech delay when he was about 4. He was diagnosed, and that was 2000. And at the time, we didn't have anything at home that was enticing for him. We ended up at a game convention. I saw some games coming out of Europe, and I started bringing those games in to help him communicate differently. They were based on, instead of luck, they had more critical thinking. They had an ability to move and make decisions. And so by using those games, I worked with a speech therapist, and we developed a regime of how to use games that were different than what she had in her speech therapy bubble. And so from there, I just developed a whole thing for years, doing games with my kids and helping my younger kids interact with their brother. And then one day my husband said, you have a business. And I was like, heck no. So about a year later, we bought a building and I opened a store. And the rest is not quite history, but
living history.
Yeah, living history. After that, he was diagnosed with a learning disability. And from there, that's when the whole working with individuals with autism all the way through dementia really became my focus.
And one thing that strikes me there is your therapist had some games that were designed to be therapeutic or educational or whatever. And my experience as somebody who's been into games forever is the games that seem to be designed to be educational tend to be a little boring. Games that lead with the fun can bring us to that other stuff, right?
Yes, absolutely. I always like to say that all games have an educational component. It's just whether or not you know what you're looking for and how to use it. But yes, a lot of commercialized big box games don't necessarily have the strategy behind them, right? Not like our Machikoros or our Catans or things like that. So it's really great when you get to see a different perspective.
What was it? We'll widen the net in a minute, but what was it with your son that he engaged with in games that ended up being therapeutic, that helped with the speech that you were working on?
There was a lot of ways to get him to stop thinking so much and focusing so much on the words he was trying to say, but answering questions while he was playing. So his speech was improving by practicing, but he was no longer doing repetition. So his development changed because he was using games as his vehicle for focus instead of focusing on a lesson or trying to perform for somebody.
Well, and it makes me think of all that's going on when we play a game.
Absolutely.
We're playing a game. It's not something we necessarily take seriously, but not just with your son now, but with people you've worked with at the store and other community groups. What is it about sitting around a table and having a game as a common shared experience that has such potential to be therapeutic in many ways?
Yeah. I like to think of myself as a pretty empathetic person, so I have a tendency to pay attention to where your eyes are focused or how the little grimacy lines on your forehead or whether you're smiling or nodding or interacting. And so by using all that's before me, I can help somebody take a pair of dice and learn how to roll it and figure out where they're going with it. And I've trained a lot of my staff members to be able to take a game and use it for therapy, use it to help unlock somebody who's locked up in dementia and be able to speak again about a color or a shape or go backwards into a number that they didn't have or a memory that they didn't have and unlock those things. But focusing on the game helps unlock the rest of your brain.
We're talking to Lynn Podian, owner of the Game Board store in Sheboygan. Lynn, you have a store. You're selling stuff, hoping to make money, presumably. But that's not all you're doing there. You're working with different community groups, different people with different backgrounds. What is it that led you to say, hey, at my store, I'm going to do more than be a store?
So I never set out to make the store about selling games. It was always about selling the concept of using games differently. And so, yes, selling games is important to me because obviously it keeps the lights on and pays my great employees. But my focus is really about how can I pick or help you pick a game that is going to help you connect better with your family members, with your friends, with your community, with your teachers. How can that game help you improve as a human and be more connected? Because connectivity while playing a game is it's a lost item. During COVID and video games, we isolate ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with video games. Video games are great. So nobody come after me for that. Video games are great. But there is a piece where there's verbal interaction, but not physical interaction. And when you can play a game or you can sit across the table from somebody and you see their interaction, you see how their hands are moving, you play a game doing this, you grow and you develop.
Now, you mentioned Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. Can you share a story about how you've used a game with someone dealing with dementia and or their loved ones?
Yeah, absolutely. We were at a SPARK program. SPARK's programs are designed for people with dementia and their caregivers to come and have some time out. Caregivers are given a chance to relax and take some time for themselves, but also to help the person with dementia to try something different. And so there's art programs and games and coffee days. In this day, we were doing a game, and we had a bunch of different tables set out with people giving game directions. And this gentleman was sitting there with his wife, and they were playing a game called Thumbs Up. And at the end stages in dementia, you lose your language, you lose your colors, you lose your shapes, your numbers, but you also lose your sense of touch and your connectivity. And she was at the stage that all she was doing was humming. And so he was wanting to connect with her differently. So I brought out this game which would take little round colored rings, put them on his thumb, and she could do that by calling out the colors. So he would look at the card and say, where's the blue ring? And she would pick up the blue ring and she'd put it on his thumb. And she was then touching his thumb, which is such a great moment, right? And so she's picking up the colors. She's recognizing the colors. She's putting it on his thumb. She's actually doing what he's asking to do. And she's humming this whole time. And suddenly she stopped humming. And she turned and she looked him in the face and she said, "Oh, do you remember? We used to play games at the cabin." And he looked at her and he smiled and he said, "I do remember." And she goes, "Oh, I loved that." And he started to cry. And he told me later, she hadn't spoken to him in 2 years.
Wow. That's an amazing story.
And it just was so fulfilling. Such a, if there's nothing else in this world, right? That moment is so important. Yeah.
You also wrote in that chapter about people on the autism spectrum in games. So what kind of experiences, what has worked well for people with autism?
Yeah, autism is such a different beast because a lot of times children are nonverbal. Sometimes they are angry because they're nonverbal. They're locked in. So using games that help unlock them or give them a pathway to being able to communicate differently or being able to succeed. And whatever success is for them is success, not what we would consider success, right? We have goals and rules in games, and we don't have to follow goals and rules. We can just follow a path, and that is our success. So using a game that helps to unlock their brain, help them connect with something, doesn't matter if it's the person or if it's with the game, that makes them be a part of it. That's the kind of stuff that games can unlock, just given that time and that connection.
I want to talk about a different kind of games. We're focusing mostly on board games or table games, role-playing games.
Oh my God, they're the best.
From the descent of Dungeons and Dragons and so on. And I've talked, for example, to military veterans who role-play together, not in a formal therapy setting, but they find it therapeutic. Is that something you work with? And what do you see as the value of role-playing games and some of the things you're doing?
Role-playing games, as we call them, RPGs, are incredibly valuable because they are another world where you can fail, you can succeed, and you can try new things, and it does not affect you personally or socially. So people with social anxiety, people with memory issues, these are all very well balanced in storytelling games. And also it's unlocking creativity. So it's a game system that is mobile and it grows and it develops and it's based on who's playing. It's an incredible way to do storytelling.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Lynn, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
That was Lynn Podian, owner of the Game Board in Sheboygan, where she's been using board games to build community and, as we heard, as a therapeutic tool for almost 20 years. She spoke with my colleague, Rob Ferret. Something that caught our eye in recent days, the Milwaukee frozen pizza giant Palermo's unveiled their Cheez-Its line of frozen pizzas. So apparently it's a Cheez-Its crust with the usual suspects for toppings like your cheese and your pepperoni. And I've been thinking about how I've got a kiddo who likes to crush potato chips into their PB&J when I'm, of course, looking the other way. So it's time to ask, is there a snack that you sneak into your recipes or a secret ingredient you use in a favorite dish? Tell us about that snack that makes it into your sandwiches or your homemade pizzas and other recipes. You can get in touch with us. Email wisconsintoday@wpr.org, or you can call or text at 888-642-0232. That's 888-642-0232, and munch on. Wisconsin Today producers include Mackenzie Crummy, Trevor Hook, and Rochelle Wilson. Our technical directors are Tyler Ditter and Sarah Hopeful. Our managing producer is Tim Peterson, and Dean Knetter is our executive producer. Learn more about us at wpr.org/Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer Kent. You're listening to WPR News.